Alright, hello Blood Bowl fans and welcome to another race rundown, and to be honest this one I've been kind of dreading because I'm not really a very big elf coach in general, so the free elf teams are slightly unknown to me in terms of my own experience. I can only really go off what I've seen other coaches doing really well and what's worked for me in the few games that I've played. So when I'm talking about elves, I would highly suggest that you take what I say with a grain of salt and you do consult bigger elf coaches than myself. Having said that though, I do understand the basics of the teams and that's what these videos are about, so let's talk about that I guess. So looking at the High Elves first of all, they have the craziest but also one of the best hats in the game. They are excellent at the passing game. This is very true so long as you have throwers and catchers in the team. The linemen are certainly capable of passing, as are the blitzers, but if you don't have those two pieces, they're more above average than excellent at passing. They're more sturdy than they seem to be. This is actually very true. When you're fighting an elf team in general, you expect them all to die, but High Elves tend to hold the line somehow because of their armor value 8 mostly. And they all have strength 3, so they're actually not a bad team. They're quite average in their stats, so even though they're better at the passing game, they can actually hold the line to an extent against teams that want to murder them. They're adaptive. Any player are potential stars. This is true, and it is actually a legitimate build to start off your game with 11 linemen and pick up some of the positionals later on. It's a little bit harder starting out, but the linemen themselves are fantastic pieces on their own, so you can play a full roster of elven linemen and still manage to win games if you have a little bit of experience. They have few skills in their first matches. Very true. They're missing some very key skills, but we'll have a look at that when we're looking at the individual pieces. And every piece is missing some key skills. The only pieces that are really built to start the game are the blitzers. Everybody else needs more. And they're not the best when it comes to fighting. That's true. You definitely don't want to be getting into a fight and having a ruck with every team. But if you do play the picking off pieces that are on their own strategy, then they can actually fight back at least a little bit. And cash can get tight if you have to replace players. Yes, as all elven teams, High Elves especially, are very expensive pieces. Everything costs a lot of money to replace. The Elven Kingdom sponsored High Elf teams. No, that's not the correct diction, sorry. The Elven Kingdom sponsored High Elf teams feature a dangerous passing game and some of the most arrogant players you will find. Rich beyond the dreams of most teams, the High Elves often feature many princes and noble-born elves on the team, and what they cannot beat, they'll buy. So there we go. The fluff is that basically they have all the money in the world, which is quite interesting. So let's make a High Elf team. Okay, let's have the 40 elves. And we're going to correct our grammar, and apparently I can't have an S at the end, really? Okay, so just 40 elves then. There we go. And we'll go for the lion, because it's the closest thing, and I like the Celestial Comments paint job more than anything, so I'm sticking with that. And let's have... okay, Edna, sure, I misspelled it, but we'll use that, whatever. Doesn't really matter, this isn't the important part, of course. There are 4 positionals in the Elven Lineman team, and as you can see they're all expensive. 100,000 for a blitzer, 90,000 for a thrower, and 90,000 for a catcher. Let's have a look at the pieces themselves though, starting with Mr. Blitzer. The Blitzer has access to general and agility on a normal roll when he levels up, and he needs a double for strength skills and passing. If you do roll a double, chances are you're taking guard. You can make an argument for Mighty Blow as well, but guard is probably the best option out of the options for pretty much any piece on a High Elf team, because it gives them that little bit extra. And they start off with block, of course, and we've talked about block a lot, so I'm not going to go into any more detail with that. If you are building a High Elf team without the all lineman setup, you're probably going to have both blitzers in your team, because they are the safest piece to start with in this roster. They have good stats as well. They have above average movement with 7, they have average strength with 3, they have above average agility with 4, and they have average armor value 8. So with agility 4 they can still pass pretty successfully. In most situations we're going to be passing and catching with a 2+ if we're close enough. So Even the Blitzer can do ball things, and the Blitzer is supposed to be the punchy piece in the team. So that's nice. And I have been kind of showing the models since this game, and I'm going to try and do that. I always find the chest a bit kind of way too big, but it does kind of give the impression that they could be female as well as male at least. And they have these really awesome helmets. I mean, look at that. That's just beautiful, isn't it? Anyway, they're an interesting design, and they're an interesting piece. Blitzers in general, they're there to do the same thing as the other Blitzers do. You're blitzing with them. Funnily enough, you're looking for the piece that is most likely to go down and stay down, and you punch them as hard as you can with the Blitzer. But best off not staying in contact with most teams where possible. Elves should really be getting 1 or 2 punches in and then getting out of the way. That's basically the way they play, if you want to play the attacking version of the game. So that's the Blitzer. The real star of, well, arguably the real star of the team is the Catcher, and the reason they're the star is because they have their extra movement. They still have Strength 3, which is better than a human Catcher, which is really stupid. They should both have Strength 3 in my opinion. They have Agility 4, and they have slightly below average armor value of 7, but that extra movement means they can often stay out of the way, and they can often stay out of trouble. They have a nice long ponytail on the back of their helmet for some reason, and they have this really, really cool glove that looks kind of like a baseball glove, but that's been stolen from a polar bear. And as you can see, they do have polar bear type things in general, or a white lion I guess, but I'm not sure what it's supposed to be actually when I think about it. And the lion shoulder pad is very nice too. Anyway, we're not here to look at the models so much. They start with catch. We've spoken about catch before. It means that you reroll a failed catch attempt or an interception, either from a pass, from a handoff, or from an interception. And they have general and agility access too. So pretty much all these pieces are taking block dodge to start with. Should have mentioned that really, though I have been mentioning it later. And a catcher's job is, of course, to stay out of the fight completely, to stay in a nice back area where there are many High Elves surrounding him, and then as soon as there's a tiniest gap, he runs through and he makes his way to the touchdown line. High Elves don't want to score all the time, but the catchers are definitely there to do the scoring, and they can score all the time if you want to play that way. You just have to risk getting punched a few times if you score too much. It's the downside of it. I think the thing that a catcher is missing at the start of the game, I did say that everybody's missing a stat, they are missing dodge. Catch is very useful, but if a catcher does get caught by something, they're probably going down, and it's really quite a big problem. So they need to waste, kind of, 2 of their stat ups getting block and dodge. So there is that as kind of a shame. But when you get to level 4, level 5 with a catcher, which is very possible because they score a lot, that's when they really start to shine. And that's when they really start to look disgusting and scary. Then we have the thrower, who is surprisingly slow in the team with movement 6, but he doesn't really need to be fast because he's mostly there to hold the ball and transfer the ball. And if you're not using the thrower as a thrower, then basically you're using him wrong. He should be used in combination with a catcher wherever possible. He has a nice brown glove, nice shoulder pad again, and very nice helmet. So same kind of idea. They have general agility and passing access, and I forgot saying all this, but you can take 2 blitzers in the team, you can take up to 4 catchers in the team, and you can take up to 2 throwers in the team. You probably will take both blitzers, you probably don't need more than 1 thrower, and a lot of people take all 4 catchers, but I don't think you need more than 2 realistically. Just because of the armor value 7, it makes your team a little bit squishier, where you could do with the survivability more as a High Elf team, I personally think. But again, I'm not a huge High Elf coach, so anybody who is watching, by all means, give your long and drawn out help below. I really appreciate it actually, it's always nice to see. So we have movement 6, which is below average, average strength of 3, above average agility, and average armor value of 8. So if he gets stuck in a fight, there's a chance that he's staying on the pitch, and there's always a chance, of course, that he can dodge out, and Elves are basically a dodgy team. They're supposed to be dodging out of tackle zones, not standing toe-to-toe with their opponent, especially if they have a big ugly orc in front of them. And they have general access, agility access, and passing access, like I said, so you can make them as a distribution piece using these passing skills. A lot of people don't though, because pass and safe throw, generally speaking, is mostly enough. I'll talk about them in a second. But you can give them block and dodge, which is very good for a throw piece and quite uncommon in many rosters. You can't usually get both safely for free. So his two skills in pass we talked about before. If he fails a pass or if a pass is inaccurate, he will automatically re-roll that pass and it will have a chance to be accurate. Safe throw is an interesting skill as well. If there is a chance that a ball can be intercepted from a pass, he makes it basically more difficult. If the pass is successful, actually the interception is cancelled completely and the passing sequence continues as normal, so he can actually ignore pieces that don't have safe throw or don't have very high agility, basically when passing the ball over their head. And it's quite a useful skill to have, especially if you're playing against a slow team, because it gives you that extra option where you can just get the ball out of a really tight position behind the opposition team, and normally when all these guys are standing in the way have a chance of catching the ball, that chance is removed. So it's a good start skill, but again, he has nothing to keep him on his feet, so you need to keep him out of the fight, and he needs block and dodge as quickly as possible, realistically. So again, it's not until level 3, level 4, that he's going to be a really solid piece. For the first couple of games, the catcher and thrower, really, you need to protect them as much as possible. And then we have the lineman, who is certainly not useless. He still has agility 4, so he can still pass, he can still throw, something that all High Elves can do quite successfully. He has no skills, but surprisingly he actually does have access to general and agility, so these can all get block dodge as well. You can have a blodge team with High Elves. It's the first team we've looked at where this is possible without having to roll doubles. They're not very fast though, that's their one downside. They're only average speed, so if you are playing with an all lineman team, you have to play very safely and positionally. If you have the catcher, the thrower, and the blitzers, you can be a little bit more adaptable with where you move to. They have average strength for 3, above average agility, and average armor value 8. So, all in all, a very solid piece, much more solid than the average human lineman, for example. Though they're very close, that extra agility gives them such an advantage over a human team if you played lineman against lineman. And unlike most teams, these linemen are not there to be punched. That's not exactly their job. Their job is to stand in the way still, so mostly you're not going to be using them for too much other than screening and being a nuisance. That's their main job. Though, with the entire High Elf team basically, if you find yourself locked up with a team, whatever the team happens to be, chances are that you're trying to break out. The only ones I'd say is maybe an exception is if you're fighting with Skaven or as if you're fighting with Wood Elves. They're the two that you can maybe match blow for blow, and in the case of Wood Elves, outpunch. Though anything else, basically you're trying to get away. Obviously the scary thing for any High Elf team is a Dwarf team, or any team that has a lot of tackle, because they cancel out the dodge that you will eventually have across the whole team. Though early on, you always have this advantage because, well, you're not using dodge to reroll, you can actually reroll naturally. So, that's the team. In terms of team builds then, let's have a look. Why did I do that? I don't know. So I did say that you can take the all lineman roster. That is a valid option, and actually let's do that first, and let's see what we can get with that, and then I'll fix it. This is a valid option, but it's not something I'd really recommend to a beginner. But what it means is you can take 3 rerolls and an apothecary at the start, so it's a very safe build, though you're going to be saving up for the other pieces as quickly as possible, and it takes a long time to buy the blitzers. That's the main problem. So what you can do instead is you can remove the rerolls, you can remove the lineman, and you can buy the blitzers, which gives the team that little bit of safety, and also the most expensive pieces are already in the team. We still have 70 grand as well, so we can either buy the extra team reroll, which I would recommend with this team, or we can buy the apothecary, which is also a valid option. Now, even more common, or we could also buy a 12 piece, though elves don't really need it, to be honest. Even though they die, it's just too expensive and it's a waste of TV. And eventually you're going to lose a piece, and the problem with having a roster of 12 or 13 in a High Elf team is that as soon as you lose a piece, you have to replace it. Whereas if you have an 11-man roster, you're automatically replaced with a loner, and the loner is almost as good as an average lineman. The only thing is that you can't re-roll him, so you don't use him for important plays, you use him only as a piece that stands in the way, and he's still a better piece than most starting linemen, so he's nothing to worry about really. And there are two more builds basically that are relatively common, he says. And one way to do it is to take a thrower, which is quite a common build as well. Even though you can take a thrower and catcher, you're better off taking a thrower, a lineman, and the extra team reroll, or the apothecary. I would recommend the team reroll again, at least until the thrower levels up and gets leader, which gives the team a free reroll so long as the thrower is on the pitch. Though the free rerolls is usually better to start off with, though later on you're probably going to remove it to cut down on TV value. If you really want to go for a positional build, you can knock out one more lineman, and you can take a catcher as well, but you can only have 2 rerolls this way, which is enough for the team. And you can still buy the apothecary after the first game quite cheaply. The only problem is, if you lose a piece, then you're really in trouble with this team. If one of these guys are killed or really badly injured and you have to fire them, then basically the team is done, and it's a problem because the pieces are so expensive to replace. But they're your 4 builds, sorry. You can have all linemen, you can have all linemen with 2 blitzers, you can have all linemen, thrower, 3 team rerolls in each of those 3 that I just mentioned, or you can have the build here with 2 team rerolls and hope that the thrower levels up quickly so you can give him leader to give you that extra team reroll. Though in an elf team, to be honest, if you're relatively sensible with the way you play, 2 team rerolls is usually enough. So there's that. In terms of developing the team then, I only have the one High Elf team that is even remotely developed, and I don't think they are really developed, but let's have a look at them. That's the Wood League team that I have, the Wooden Elves. First of all, I did go for both blitzers, but one of the blitzers died, so this is the situation. And I also went for the catcher-thrower build. It was a really bad start, and since then I've bought another catcher. And as you can see, the only skill ups I only have 2. I have block, which is usually your first choice, block or dodge on each of your linemen, or a combination, maybe some wrestle. And I don't think I've spoken about wrestle actually, so let's just talk about wrestle quickly a little bit. If a piece has wrestle, what it means is when you are blocked by a block piece, or when you block any piece, if you get a 2 down, you can force both pieces to hit the ground. There's no injury roll, but both pieces are floored, so it's very good, for example, if you're hitting a ball carrier, because they're going to lose the ball automatically. And it's very good if you're hitting a block piece, because it means that the block piece gets down and out of the way for that drive. So that's the main focus. And I did go for the full positional build at the start, which means I do have 2 team rerolls. I've played 2 games, and I still don't have leader yet on my thrower, and I haven't also been able to buy the apothecary, because I replaced the player with catcher for some reason, which was stupid, but there we go, that's what I did. So this is not a build I would actually recommend, personally, but a lot of players like it, so what can I say? And if we have a look at an AI build team, let's just see what they've done and see what I can say about that. Where's the high TV one? There it is. And we can talk about the kind of things you're giving your players in general. Right, so the 2 blitzers, the first thing they've been given is dodge, which is, of course, a very logical choice. The second choices are kind of surprising. I'd probably give one of these guys strip ball, which means that if you tackle a piece that is holding the balls, so long as the attack is successful in any way, you don't get a skull, basically. The opposition player is dropping the ball unless they have sure hands. Frenzy is a very strange choice on a blitzer, and I would not recommend it. Sidestep is an interesting choice, but it kind of suggests this piece is dodging out of the way. So for these pieces, you want to basically give them things that can make them a legitimate problem for any opposition they're going towards. So Dauntless is even an option, because then you can use them against bigger pieces. For example, like I said, strip ball is very useful. Even things like pass block can make them quite a nuisance to deal with. for an opposition team. But Frenzy is a strange one, and you mostly want to be using general access skills on a blitzer, though some of the agility, like sidestep, is quite useful. Also, things like catch can be useful if you want to have even more options in terms of where the ball can go. If you just want to make a completely threatening team where the ball can go anywhere, then give everything catch. As for the catches, they have been given dodge block, all 3 of them. There's 4 of them, sorry. 3 of them have been given dodge block, which is very, very common. I would give 1 wrestle probably and make them a designated stripper. So that's wrestle, strip ball, and fend, things like this. I would give each catcher fend as well, so if they are getting attacked then they will fall back, though if this was my team and I had some more level ups now, one of these pieces would be given fend. He would be the designated person who usually gets the ball. One of these people will get sidestep, which will just make him a really annoying piece to deal with. And the last one I would probably give strip ball, just so he can basically force the ball out of the opposition hand. And this last catcher who already has leap, which is an interesting choice. And leap is quite useful on the team. What leap means is that you can jump right over tackle zones, though you still have to roll dice to do it, and it still costs movement allowance. And this leap piece needs block, so that would be the next thing he gets, or he needs wrestle. In fact, he'd probably have wrestle and strip ball, and he would be the designated stripper. And as the lineman, you can see 2 of them have been given block. I would actually give these 2 dodge as well, just so I have a combination of block and dodge, maybe one of them wrestle. And then they'd get the second skill, then they'd get whatever else they can get. I'm not really worried about them leveling up further. And there are 2 throwers here. Right away I'd get rid of one of them, there's no need for 2. And sure hands makes them just that little bit safer, fair enough, but they're better off getting a skill that can save them first, so block or dodge, especially if you have 2. One of these should have block, and the other one, sure hands, fine. And dump off is a strange skill, but we'll talk about dump off when we get to the Dark Elves. So basically, still want block and dodge throughout the whole team. That's the basics of High Elves. And then anything after that is useful. If you have some extra pieces, like this team does, where they have 2 throwers, then sure, use one of them as a non-safety piece, but more a distribution piece. So this piece is being built as a distribution piece. So if we went sure hands, accurate, for example, maybe, well, I'd still have block by that point. Leader, kickoff, return, all these things are useful. It's also a good idea to give a lineman kick, because kick can have a really big impact on an elf game. When you are choosing where the ball goes, you are more likely to steal the ball. So if you are playing a really slow team like dwarves, you want to kick deep most of the time. And if you're playing a fast team or a hybrid team, you probably want to kick quite shallow and hope that you can steal the ball with a blitz, or hope that you can steal the ball in a couple of turns. So basically, there's a lot of pressure play on the ball, and kick really helps with that. That's it for building the team, I think. And this is where I fall down a bit, because I don't have the experience to really talk about a High Elf team, but I'll do my best based on what I've seen. The strategy for playing certain teams. Against humans, you don't want to get into a fight with them, even though your stats are almost the same in terms of fighting, so you do want to definitely be picking off pieces when you can, but don't stand on them. If you are standing line to line, then basically you're flipping a coin with them, and it's not really a good idea. Humans do kind of want to do that though, because they have more skills to help them in the fight, and whereas you're lacking those skills, at least early on. If you're playing the 1600 game, then maybe you've got an all-blodge team, and therefore the fight isn't so much in the favor of the humans. But in general, you want to use your strength, which is your agility, because that's something that the humans don't have. And you especially want to use your throwers and catchers to get the ball into really awkward positions, and away from the human catchers, which are the biggest threat to your own catchers because they can run equally as fast. So when you're on defense, you mostly want to be screening and just nipping at the sides whenever you can, just picking on something a bit weak, trying to hit the catcher, trying to hit the thrower, trying to hit a lineman, just trying to do some damage, avoiding the ogre as much as possible, and trying to get out of the way of the blitzers wherever you can. Especially if the blitzers are working in combination, they can really, really hurt your team. Opposition blitzers, I mean. On offense, basically you want to be moving the ball around as much as possible, make the humans chase it, and they'll have to chase it with the catchers, which means that eventually the catchers will be exposed, which means that you can pick on them. That's the Best way I've seen people playing against humans, and it's the best success I've had personally playing as High Elves against humans. So that's the strategy there, basically. Orcs. Orcs are a mixed bag. You're kind of happy to see them, but at the same time, you know you're going to get hurt in the game. Of course, I don't think I even need to say it, but I will say it. If you go toe-to-toe with an Orc team, they are going to destroy you. 9 times out of 10. They're designed to destroy the opposition team, and you're designed to not be in a fight. So, under no circumstances try and stand toe-to-toe with an Orc team. If you do find yourself stuck on an Orc piece at the end of the turn, dodge out. It's safer. You're more likely to get away, and you can set up a screen so the Orcs can't move forward. Orcs are slow, so when you're on defense, keep dodging them because they will keep standing on you, but only dodge one piece back and try and keep a relatively flat line so the Orcs can't break through. Orcs need 3 turns, realistically, to get the ball out of their half into your touchdown zone. So keep that in mind. You want to hold them in their touchdown or as close as possible to their touchdown line until the last 3 turns in your defensive drive. In your offensive drive, it's very much the same thing as with humans. Basically make the Orcs chase the ball, because you can really move the Orcs out of all kinds of weird positions. If the Orc coach is a stubborn coach, like me for example, and they're going to set up a line against you, then really it's a slog and you have to try and dodge through it and hope that it succeeds. Though you have to dodge through with a lot of pieces, because if you put 1 or 2, the Orcs are going to pick on them. If you put quite a few threats through, the Orcs have to kind of split up and sort you out. And sometimes you have to risk a couple of your linemen in order to make that break through the Orc team. Your blitzers should be trying to get through a weak point as well, but if you're facing a good Orc coach, they're not going to have many weak points in their defense. Good luck fighting Orcs. A Dwarf team is also a mixed blessing, where early on especially, you have an advantage over Dwarves because their tackle is cancelled out. They actually have a skill that is no use to them, because you have no dodge on the team starting off. So, same kind of idea with the Dwarves really. You want to be getting out of their way wherever possible, and because you have almost double their movement in some situations, you really want to make them chase the ball. The only ones that are really a threat to you are the runners and the troll slayers, because they can kind of chase down most of your team. The catcher can still get away from everybody, but the thrower and the lineman, not so much. There are pieces that can catch them, so keep that in mind. Linemen should be used very much to screen. Thrower should be kept as far out of the reach of the Dwarfs as possible with the ball, and your catchers should always be threatening the scoreline. Even if you don't plan to score, just keep the catchers in a position where it looks like you're going to score so the Dwarfs have to chase you. And then you can move to the other side and keep doing this. The only problem with that is that Dwarves are going to get at least 1 block on you every turn, so just keep this in mind, and they do have the skills to destroy your team. So, realistically, and so long as Nuffle is at least being kind, or being fair even, they don't have to be kind, you're only going to give Dwarves 1 block every turn against you. On both defense and offense. And on defense, same thing. You basically want to set up a screen, usually two pieces deep, not necessarily standing on each other, but so the Dwarves have to get through 2 pieces each turn. And just go back 1 step each turn, and the Dwarves can't score. Unless they break through. Skaven is a more difficult one, and this is not a matchup I'm used to seeing or playing, so everything I'm going to say here is going to be completely theoretical. I'm going to say that out loud. The advantage that you have over the Skaven team is your armor value, so you can, in theory, win a war of attrition by knocking out linemen and by knocking out gutter runners. However, I wouldn't recommend that you go toe-to-toe and just fight them, because at the end of the day, Skaven are going to run around you in that case. The Skaven are actually slightly faster than you, but they have slightly less agility than you, which is strange. So you need to keep hold of the ball as much as possible, keep those gutter runners locked up, and make sure the storm vermin aren't blitzing things that are useful to you. And if they have a rat ogre as well, try and stay out of its way. Make sure that he's blitzing with the rat ogre every turn, so there's a chance that he's going to fail one of his rolls. In terms of defense, it's not quite the same, but screening, I would say screening against every single team as elves, basically. But with the Skaven, you also want to be screening, but blocking the team using tackle zones and using blocks as much as possible as well. Though not going toe-to-toe. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it makes sense in my head. Hopefully it makes sense when you're listening. And when you're on offense, basically, you want to keep the ball nice and safe and try and force the rats to chase you into a position where you want them, and you can kind of surround them and then get away. Because your catcher is fast, and the only thing that can catch them is gutter runners. If the gutter runners are stuck in tackle zones, there's a small chance they're not getting out. So always try and base the gutter runners if you can, and screen off the rest of the pieces, basically. I'm not going to talk about mirrors. Elf on elf action, which sounds like a fantastic parody of something. Again, this is mostly theoretical, though I do have some experience with Dark Elves at least, so I can talk from a Dark Elf perspective, I guess. The main difference between the High Elves and the Dark Elves, well, you have slightly better armor value against the Witches and the Runner, and you have less skills. That's basically the difference between your two teams. You also have positionals that the Dark Elves simply don't have, so you do have the adaptability that Dark Elves can't quite manage. They don't have a thrower and they don't have a catcher, they only have basic pieces. They have more block than you though to start with. And the Witch has dodge, and the Witch can be a bit of a problem. So you have the ability to move the ball more than they do. That's your one advantage against Dark Elves. And in a fight, technically you're a little bit more survivable, but it's not really worth the fight the same way. With Dark Elves and High Elves, it's basically anything you can do, I can do better kind of game, where you're both trying to outscore each other and you're both trying to outpunch each other. The strategy is very much the same. You're trying to pick off the weaker pieces, and you're trying to keep the ball away from each other and slowing down your opposition drive. There's not much more I can say about that. I just don't have the experience to talk about it. And Bretonnians, same kind of thing, but what I'm going to say is theoretical again. You do have a problem with Bretonnians because they have so much block and wrestle on their team, and those linemen are really, really frustrating, so they can stay in the way, stopping your advance with the ball. High Elves only need, well, 1 or 2 turns to get up the line though, so there is that. Against the Bretonnian team, I'm going to try and keep the opposition lineman in the center of the pitch, and then I'm going to have to deal with the blitzers and the blockers separately. The blockers usually come in support of linemen, so there's a good chance that we can lock up the majority of the team in the center and run around the outside only worrying about the blitzers. Though the blitzers are worth worrying about because they have block and they can be a bit frustrating. The only thing I can really say about Bretonnians is that, again, you don't really want to get into a fight with them. It's roughly 50-50, but they have more block and they have more wrestle, so they're more likely to survive than you. Same idea though, try and keep the ball away from them because you do have the agility advantage in terms of the catcher. And that's about all I can say. Again, I haven't really played many of these games. Chaos is an interesting one. Chaos, when they're high TV, probably their favorite thing to see is High Elves, because their team is designed specifically to murder that team. They have all this mighty blow, all of this claw, and all of this piling on. And all of it affects High Elves. Oh dear. However, when you're facing them at low TV, then you've got a good chance of beating them because of their simple lack of skills and their inability to maneuver about. A good Chaos coach will stand off you as much as possible and try and focus down your weaker pieces, so you want to counteract that by forcing a certain flank so the team have to chase you, for example, because you have the speed advantage. Also, moving the ball is really useful. If the Chaos are getting a bit too close, then give it to a catcher and run the catcher away. It sounds easy. It's not, but it's the best way to deal with the Chaos team. And at high TV, all you can really do is try and stay out of their way as much as possible. At high TV, the majority of Chaos teams that are built in a really bad way, they will just focus on killing your team. So you've got to kind of accept that there are going to be a few pieces gone, but you're going to win the game. However, if a team is built relatively sensibly, so there's lots of block, then they can be a bit of a problem for you. So you're less likely to get killed, but you're more likely to have a bit of a slog on your hands. And same sort of thing with the Orcs and the Humans. Stand off them, try and get around them. With Wood Elves, the only team that you can really bully, because of the weak armor value. Wood Elves don't want to go toe-to-toe with literally anybody. They don't even want to go toe-to-toe with you, so you can actually force them into a fight. That's probably the best way to play against Wood Elves, because that's the only thing they have as a weakness against you. They can actually outmaneuver you, and they can match you agility for agility. So basically you want to lock them down as much as possible and keep them in tackle zones and forcing them through other tackle zones behind. So have a solid front line and a second line as well, so the elves just can't break through. When you're on offense, then go right on the attack. Just try and hit as many pieces as you can, and the wood elves will struggle a little bit. But try and keep the ball as safe as possible with lots of pieces supporting it at all times, because wood elves are best at stealing the ball from you. So you want to be using roughly half the team on offense and roughly half the team on defense the whole time you're playing. Or half the team on ball chasing and half the team on holding the line, one or the other. Lizardmen. Lizardmen, at least theoretically for me, don't sound like such a bad matchup, early on at least, because they don't have the maneuverability to chase you down apart from with the skinks, and they can't afford to chase you down with the skinks because the skinks are too squishy. If it was me playing as lizards, I can only really talk from that perspective because I have more experience as a lizard coach, then my Saurus would be setting up nice and flat, my Crocs would be in the way as well, and my skinks would be trying desperately to get hold of that ball. And they would do that in combination with at least one Saurus as well. So there would always be a Saurus on your cage or on your screen. He would be punching the piece with a skink in support. In order to counteract this, I guess, again, try and force them into one corner, try and force them into one flank so they have to move the team to counteract you. But keep a catcher out loose and the thrower with the ball, so you can get the ball out of there in a tight situation. I'm not sure about this matchup. Anybody who plays High Elves, please comment below about the lizards, because it's a bit of a difficult one to theoretically think about. Against Norse, you have some major disadvantages early on because Norse have all of that block, of course, so they are going to be one-dying your guys all day long, which is not good news for High Elves. And the few that are stronger are going to be two-dying as well, of course. Same kind of idea, really. It's kind of tempting to get into a fight with Norse because they only have armor value 7, but it's just not a good idea. Still pick off pieces one by one as much as you can, so nibble at the flanks, and the rest of the guys stand in a defensive line so an opposition can't get through nice and easily. And following on from that, on offense, same sort of idea basically. Slowly make your way up, keep things screened, keep the ball safe, and do your best to get through a gap. Norse are pretty easy to open up. You can knock down a couple of pieces normally relatively successfully. So that's basically the way. Punch a hole and get through it. Against Undead, this is a matchup I've had many times, but on the Undead side, and I can honestly say I've never lost a game as a real Undead build against a High Elf team. So, what to say about that? I would say what people do wrong when they're fighting Undead as High Elves. On defense, they don't put enough pressure on the ball because they're afraid of the mummies, they're afraid of the wights, etc. This is going to be some strange advice, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. Again, High Elf coaches, comment below and correct me if you have more experience in this matchup. But I would really recommend locking down the ball as much as possible. If the mummy happens to be in the way, then that's a bit of a problem, but you can run around the mummy at least, so try and hit the cage in the back instead. The ghoul is pretty fast though, so you can't leave too many pieces out of position at the back of a cage if they're playing that tactic, or the back of a screen if they're playing that tactic. You need to basically keep a couple of pieces in the front on attack and a couple of pieces in the back just ready for that ghoul to break through. Though the problem with this matchup basically is it's very difficult to keep the numbers up because, well, a good Undead coach is going to be hitting you with a mummy as much as possible, and both mummies are going to be chasing you down together. And if they can't get you with a mummy safely, then at least a wight is going to hit you, and there's still a pretty good chance that something's getting broken. Most importantly, try and give them just one punch a turn, and try and break their cage every time they set up. If they have skeletons, then aim for the skeletons. If they have ghouls, then aim for the ghouls, because they're the most likely things to get squished. Other than that, there's not really much I can say there. Necromantic is maybe even slightly scarier, though I've never had this... I've had this matchup once, but it didn't go very well for me. It was relatively a close game, actually. That one's in this playlist if you do want to see that game between the High Elves and the Necromantic team. That's where the Blitzer was killed. With the Necromantic team, at least they're slow, apart from the Wolves and the Ghouls if they have them. The biggest threat, as with most teams, is that Wolf, because he has this Claw, and Claw hurts High Elves as much as it hurts anybody else. So you want to make sure that only one of the Wolves can hit you every turn. And you've got to just hope that Claw doesn't pay off. If you can hit the Wolves back though, if you can force them into a position where the Wolves have to come forward to hit you, then they're usually going to be left on their own, and then you can deal with them. Though whenever I do that to an opposition piece, I usually find they use the Wolf as a ball carrier instead, so that creates all kinds of problems as well. Still basically the same strategy as before, with your line back ready to sort out anything that breaks through your gap and the rest of the team chasing down the opposition ball. And when you're playing, keeping the Wolves screened off against the ball especially, and trying to avoid the whites as much as possible, and staying away from the flash columns. They're pretty slow, so that's pretty possible. And zombies are way too slow to keep up, so you do have that as an advantage. You can always get away from a zombie. So forcing the zombies to reposition every turn is always a good idea as High Elves, and that is what I have done successfully as a High Elf team against Necromantic. Just making sure the zombies are always moving, because it's not really what they want to be doing. Nurgle team. On paper this sounds like the worst matchup you can hope for, because they're basically designed to stop you from hitting them, and also to stop you from passing the ball. Though you do have slightly better agility than other pieces, so you can still attempt to pass, but make sure that all your passes are short, and I would recommend passing as little as possible. Keeping the ball away from the Warriors and away from the Beast of Nurgle is essential, though a good Nurgle coach will set them up so you can't. So that will be the front line, and then behind there'll be the Rotters, or the other way around. And no matter where you are, the disturbing presence is going to cause problems. That's a good Nurgle coach. Beating down on Rotters, because if you do manage to injure them, they're not likely to come back. And beating down on Pestigors as well, because they are the biggest threat to your team. While avoiding Chaos Warriors and Nurgle Beast. Beast of Nurgle, whatever you want to call it. Otherwise, relatively the same strategy. In defense, make a screen so they can't get through, moving one step back each turn. And on offense, try and get through them, but try and keep hold of the ball. You're better off trying to move the ball as opposed to throw the ball in this matchup. With Khemri. Khemri sounds like it should be a really good matchup, because there's so much armor value 7, and the only thing you really need to avoid is the Tomb Guardians. Tomb Guardians usually work in pairs. You usually have a pair of 2 chasing you down and a pair of 2 chasing you down. They don't usually all work together. And you can kind of split up the team this way, especially if you put a catcher on either flank, then they're probably going to send 2 Tomb Guards after each catcher. It's a bit of a risk, but you can usually split up the team completely, focus down the pieces in the middle that are weakest, and basically dodge the catchers out and position it so the Tomb Guardians are always out of position. If they are doing a kind of flatline attack though, or a flatline defense, it can be a bit more difficult. Then it's the same sort of thing, just trying to wear them down, giving them only 1 block every turn, which is quite possible against Khemri, and trying to get around them. And on defense, same idea again. Every time you can hit the ball, because Khemri really struggle to pick it up. But if they are defending the ball well, then same thing, slow them down, 1 turn at a time, 1 space at a time. And finally Chaos Dwarfs then. It's also kind of a scary matchup, because their fastest piece is also their strongest piece, so that's the biggest threat to your catcher, your thrower, and basically anything that's in its way. So trying to screen off against them with less valuable pieces seems to be a very good idea. The Chaos Dwarves are really slow, so you can probably get away from them, and the Hobgoblins are pretty weak, so you probably want to be fighting them where you can, but not standing toe-to-toe with them. Never stand toe-to-toe with an opposition piece. That's all I can say about High Elves, I guess. I haven't had enough experience with High Elves to be really knowledgeable about this team, so I would appreciate any further feedback from High Elf coaches below, or Elf coaches in general, because they can actually help, though High Elves are slightly different to Wood Elves and Dark Elves, of course. It's been interesting talking about Elves, though, because I am trying to improve my gameplay with Elves. I understand how they work theoretically, but actually putting it in practice is a lot more difficult. So, there's that said again. And just to finish off then, I do have a Discord channel now, specific for my channel, and also for other content creators, and various things that you can access by using certain commands in the tag, in the chat logs. For example, if you are a new coach, you can type certain commands and you can get access directly to links that will take you to somewhere where you can get help, like Blood Bowl Tactics, like Fumble, etc. There's lots of content creators there, including myself and other content creators that I think are very good. They're all automatically linked to the channel, and if you type in their name, you get all of their channel details. And, well, the Discord channel is a lot of fun, so the people who've been part of it so far have had a lot of fun playing with the different things I've set up, so come join me there. I'll look forward to seeing you. The Discord is linked below. And I'll also say at the end of this, I'll also make a separate video as well, but I will say at the end of this very quickly, I have set up a schedule now, and I will talk about the schedule very quickly now. And I set up the schedule specifically because I want to cut down on the amount of work I want. And the schedule is somewhat dictated by the people in my Discord channel. You can vote on literally everything, so do come and check that out. And where is my schedule? There it is. So there'll be one of these every week. They will cut these race rundowns, and they will come out on Thursday from now on. I'm going to put this one out today, which is Tuesday, but starting next week I'll be down to a schedule, and Thursday will be the race rundown day. On Monday there will be a game poll open for the ICBBL and a weekly breakdown from the ICBBL leagues. On Tuesday there will be a Rebel Game of Choice commentary. The Game of Choice is decided by the people in my Discord channel. On Wednesdays, the Rebel game poll will open, and the Rebel All-Stars rundown will happen every second week. On Thursday, the ICBBL race close will... the ICBBL poll, will close, and like I say, there will be a race rundown or a miscellaneous video later on. On Friday, there will be the ICBBL Game of Choice, maybe a week old by that point, and on Saturday there will be a friendly game. On Sunday, there will either be no video, which is most likely, or I may play a different game to Blood Bowl. So that's what's happening going forward. Anyway, I'm just doing that in this video because it happens to be the first video I've made since creating the schedule. So if you didn't want to hear all that, I'm sorry. But that's all. Thank you for watching if you have got this far, and I look forward to seeing you develop your skills with different races. Have fun on the pitch, and may Nuffle smile on you. Bye bye for now.